Welcome to the dimensioning tutorial. In this video, we will follow the dimensioning conventions to properly dimension a multi-view sketch. As you look at your multi-view sketch, you may wonder where to begin adding dimensions. Because the front view usually contains the longest dimension of the object, has the fewest hidden features, and displays the most natural position of the object, we will add dimensions to the front view first. Let's start by adding the dimension for this feature. Now, the dimensioning conventions tell us to place all dimensions outside the object. To do this, we use extension lines. These lines extend from the object to the location where we want to place the dimension. Based on the dimensioning conventions, extension lines shouldn't touch the object, and dimensions should be placed outside the object, preferably between adjacent views whenever possible. Be sure to include space between the extension line and the object line so that it is clear where the object ends and the extension line begins. Let's do the next feature. We can choose to dimension the feature directly, or we can dimension starting from the left edge of the object instead, making it easy to deduce the dimension of the feature by subtraction. It is common practice to stack dimensions from smallest on the inside to largest on the outside. So, whenever possible, we will go with that. To complete the horizontal dimensions of this view, we need to add a dimension for the longest feature of the object. The dimensioning conventions require that dimensions be placed between adjacent views whenever possible, and extension lines should not cross object lines. So if we place the dimension below the view, both conventions are violated. We will place the dimension above the view instead. You might be wondering why we didn't add a dimension for this feature. The reason is it's unnecessary. You can deduce the dimension by subtracting 1.5 from 2. So we will leave this dimension off. Okay, so we have taken care of the horizontal features of the front view, which correspond to these edges in the isometric view. Now let's work on the vertical features. We need to add the dimension for this feature. Remember, the dimension should not be inside the object, should not cross object lines, and should be placed between adjacent views whenever possible. So I'm going to put it here. Next, we'll add a dimension for this feature. We can either add a dimension on the shorter edge or add a dimension that shows the full height of the object. If we dimension the shorter section on the inside of this extension line, the bottom extension line overlaps the object line. This breaks a dimensioning convention and also makes it difficult to tell where the object ends. If we add the dimension of the shorter surface to the right of the extension lines, our extension lines cross over each other and violate another convention. This means we are better off adding this dimension to another view. This same dimension is represented with this feature in the right view. We can either add the dimension directly to the feature, or we can choose to dimension the overall height of the object. Both ways are correct. There is no need to add a dimension to this feature, because it is the same edge as the one on the front view, and we don't want to add a duplicated dimension. The last vertical dimension that we need to include is the height of this side of the object. You might be tempted to show the dimension for this edge on the right view. However, this is a hidden line, and we want to avoid dimensioning hidden lines whenever possible, so we will use the front view instead. If we add the dimension between the adjacent views, it crosses over the object lines, so we will put this dimension on the left side. Because when it comes to choosing between having a dimension on the outside of the views and crossing object lines, it is always better to go with the dimension outside of the views. we have added all the dimensions that describe the features shown in the front view. The only dimension that's left is the object's depth. This dimension is visible in both the top and right views. You can choose either one. I will go ahead and add it here between the top and isometric views. The dimensioning of this object is now complete. All necessary dimensions have been added and all the conventions have been followed, allowing the reader to recreate the object accurately. No unnecessary dimensions are included. No dimensions are included for hidden lines. All dimension lines are located outside the object and between adjacent views whenever possible. Extension lines do not touch or cross the object. And finally, no dimension lines or extension lines cross. Now, what if we need to dimension an object that has a hole in it? Let's look at this example. To dimension a hole in the object, we need to specify the size and location of the hole on the object. This means we have to make an exception to our dimensioning conventions and draw extension lines that cross the object lines. To dimension the width of this hole, extension lines have to cross the object line to get to this feature. And to specify how far the hole is from the left edge, we add this dimension. So now it's time for you to put your skills to the test. Find an object that you can sketch and practice dimensioning. And always remember to have fun.